Welcome back. This is officially the first of the RAF videos. So I did say last week, looking at when the potential release date's going to be. So if you haven't seen that already, check it out there because you'll also understand why I'm talking about RAF already. So before you're like, it's too soon in the comments, look at that video and it'll explain exactly why I'm talking about RAF now. So I want to talk about some things which potentially when RAF Classic comes, and I say potentially, it's coming, obviously, but we're going to have to assume it's in a 3.3.5 state. The same as in Classic, it was in 1.12. 2.4.3 for TBC, so it's safe to assume we're going to be in the final patch state, as far as class changes and all of those things go. So I want to talk about a few things that you probably have forgot. You might not have forgot all of these, but I guarantee one of them takes you by surprise. So there's about 6 or 7 topics to get through, so let's just crack on. Oh, but before we do, obviously make sure you like and subscribe for lots more future RAF content, gold making content for TBC. Just check the channel out. There's a lot of content for you to get through. So I've made a list and I'm going to start basic. The barbershop. No one really cares, but yeah, the barbershop's implemented. I'm going to gloss straight over that one the same way I will with the achievement system. You know the achievement system's coming, there's no need to talk about it. But what you might have forgot are things like the spell power change. So the way plus spell damage and healing, as we know it now, all changes to flat spell power. So when that change comes in, your healing, so your plus healing as a healer, goes down substantially. But all the healing spells were actually adjusted, so there was no net increase or decrease to your healing, basically. So basically all the casters will stay the same because the spell damage and healing is basically converted straight into spell power. But obviously when you look at plus healing gear, you get healing and then you get a small percentage as damage. So your plus healing will always be sky high compared to a warlock's plus damage. So they change it to spell power and it's just spell power and that's it. So any piece of gear that drops in Wrath of the Lich King can be useful for both a healer and a DPS quite equally, which is quite good, so less gears go into waste, but it also causes a lot more competition on those good items where they've got, let's say, spell power and haste. There's a lot of classes, both healers and DPS, that want haste, but it does give you a lot more options when you're trying to get your pre-raid bisc gear, for example, to get straight into Nax, etc., or get into Nax as quick as possible. That could be one change you forgot about. What about raid-wide buffs? So trust me, there's some that are going to catch you by surprise. You might remember spell power, you might remember raid-wide buffs, where at the moment, a raid leader sat there trying to balance a group in TBC to get, the perfect melee comp, the perfect caster comp, like stacking warlocks and with a shaman and a boomy or whatever, however you set your groups up. None of that matters. So all the buffs become raid wide. So, if there's an enhancement shaman that gives attack power, everybody in the raid is going to get it. If there's a shaman totems, so at the moment, totems are just party wide, you put shaman totems down, they're raid wide. And a lot of these abilities don't start to stack as well, interestingly. So it gives you a lot more flexibility in raids. And a lot of the classes bring the same thing, which sounds like a negative, but it's really not, because it means you haven't got to be as picky. A Death Knight, for example, can bring the spell damage taken debuff on the target, but so can a Boomy. So if you haven't got a Boomy, but you've got a DK, you're still not losing that massive amount of damage. You've not got to take that one class who brings that one buff that you can't get anywhere else. The vast majority of them you can still get from something else other than heroism or bloodlust. Just a minor one, but good reason to talk about it, is the currency tab. Now, badges of justice and that you get, obviously, in TBC at the moment, they're sat in your bag. It's really annoying. A bit like the pets and mount tab that's going to come in RAF as well, so we might as well tie those both together. You're going to get some bag space back. You might have forgot about that. You might think you're going to have your mount in your bag. You're not. You've got a mount tab. Not only have you got a mount tab, you've got a currency tab as well. But the main reason for RAF doing that is there's a lot more currencies added. Basically for each tier, there's a different badge of justice, but they're not. They're called emblems. So each tier's got its own emblem, and then you get things like stones, which are to do with the Wintergrass rewards, basically, that you can spend them on, as well as tons of other things. Some are even profession specific. Now this is an interesting one, which you might have forgot, and it sounds really minor and like it doesn't matter, but mob tagging. Depending on the class that you play, depends on how frustrating this can be on busier servers. But let's say me, as an example, as a druid in cat form, I have to physically run up to the mob to tag it. If I fairy fire, because it does 0 damage, it doesn't count as my target now, even though I could have tagged that before, let's say, a hunter, because they're the worst for it. We know what hunters are like. In Wrath of the Lich King, when you're mob tagging, it actually is just anything that causes threat towards the target or gets you in combat with them. So Fairy Fire will count as a tag. If you put Shadow Word Pain on, it won't need to tick before you get the mob tag. So if you run around Shadow Word Pain and everything as a Shadow Priest, you can't then have a Boomy, for example, Moonfire before the Shadow Word Pain ticks to steal your tag. Now, I said it was quite an interesting one. It's one of those things that actually sort of just makes everybody equally competent at being able to get tags on mobs quickly, you know, rather than there being Boomies with their Moonfire, which are OP, Hunters with, you know, an instant arcane shot, things like that, you know. There's classes that we know are much better at we'll say stealing tags, and I'm not making it sound like a bad thing, as in there's nothing wrong with mob tagging. If there's loads of you and you're all fighting for mobs, you know, you should all have a fair shot at trying to get it. So mob tagging changed, and I genuinely think that is quite an interesting one. I'm going to add a raid in here, and the only reason I'm going to add it is because I always forget about it. And you got to remember, I play on a lot of different servers, you know, and I always forget that Onyxia became a boss in Wrath of the Lich King. Did you? If you forgot, tell me in the comments, genuinely, because it's the one that I always forget about. We know we get Nax again, and then that I draw a blank. I start thinking about Ulduar, Tok, everything else. But yeah, actually, in 3.2.2, you get Onyxia again. And it's sort of, you know, similar models to what they were originally, similar loot, you know, as in you get Onyxia's head, etc. It's just tuned for 25 people or 10 people. You can do 10 or 25, and drops appropriate level loot. But I just thought I'd throw that in there, because I genuinely do forget about Onyxia whenever we talk about Wrath. Did you remember the in-game calendar comes in Wrath? And do you think we should have had that in-game calendar all along? Because we use, or you probably use, I use Discord, for example, to create events, you know, to create sign-ups for raids. And it's really annoying because, you know, it's on Discord. A lot of people are still a bit dense and they don't go over to Discord to check, you know, if there's a sign-up on there, or they forget, or whatever, you know, or they've even got your own guild server muted because they keep getting too many notifications. Well, the in-game calendar allows you to create raids in-game, track Darkmoon Fair and other world events, and it just makes it cleaner, because no one's really got an excuse, because your calendar, when you've got a new event, like sort of pulsates, it glows, so you've not got an excuse for not accepting or declining raid invites from your guild. But that is genuinely one that I'm really excited about, and I really do wish, you know, I've complained about, well, not complained, but, you know, been an advocate for changes in vanilla and TBC. The in-game calendar one is one that I never mentioned, but actually really should have been thought about, if I'm honest. There was quite huge mount changes as well during Wrath. You've got to remember, some of these come at different points during the expansion, you know, so some of them could be brought in future phases. Like, I know a lot of people are hoping Random Dungeon Finder comes in a bit later on in the expansion, like it did during Wrath, but I'm hesitant there. I think Random Dungeon Finder will probably be in from the start. But mount changes went through a lot of changes. The mount system went through a lot of changes. That's how I should have said it. I mean, they halved the time it takes to mount up from 3 seconds to 1.5. Riding skill starts at 20 with 100% speed at 40, and flying skill can be trained at 60. So you get to fly around Outland to do your leveling. You know, obviously you get your mount earlier, they're cheaper. Being able to get 100% riding at level 40, and it being, you know, a reasonable amount of gold, so you're not going to struggle to actually obtain it, you know, aiding the leveling experience when you've got 80 levels to do now rather than 70, not a bad thing in my opinion, but it might be one you forgot about. I'm going to end it with one more, which I'd like to say I saved the best till last, but it's not the best, but it is a good change in my opinion. So the meeting stones outside dungeons got changed. So you know, at the moment, if you're boosting, which I know people hate boosting, but let's say you are, you know, and it's annoying getting people to these places because you have to be of the appropriate level range to use them. Well, that actually changes. All the meeting stones in World of Warcraft during Wrath of the Lich King are basically, they require level 15. That's it. So if you're 15, you can summon a level 80. If you're 80, you could summon a level 15. You know, so it was just an overall change. I'm quite an ultaholic in Wrath of the Lich King. Not any other game, but I love leveling ults in Wrath. So actually this, for getting around, normally leveling as a group anyway, because, yeah, Random Dungeon Finder, but occasionally you might jump out and do some quests. So you've got a group of you to get each other around quickly. I don't see it as a bad thing, really, but let me know your thoughts. But I would say they're some of the changes that are not the major ones, like the introduction of Ulduar, or, you know, the achievement system, or anything like that, or, you know, flying, Northrend flying. You know, they're ones that I think some people will forget, but they're quite game changing. You know, even like I said, the mob tagging, quite a big one. The in-game calendar, I think's huge, honestly. And once you start using it, if you don't remember how it works, or you've never played Wrath of the Lich King, it's a godsend. It really is. So look, if you want to hear more about Wrath, the next videos I'm going to be putting out is about how each individual class changes in Wrath of the Lich King, and that's going to be followed by how each profession changes as well. So if you want to arm yourself with all that knowledge, make sure you hit the subscribe button and ring the bell for notifications so you don't miss any future videos, and I'll see you on the next one.